Hello and welcome to the Leaders in Supply Chain podcast. I am your host, Radu Palamariu, Managing Director of Elcott Global. Our mission is to connect the supply chain ecosystem in Asia and globally by bringing forward the most interesting leaders in the industry. And it's my pleasure to have with us today Eugene Lee. Eugene is the Chief Operating Officer for GoGoVan, which is the Asia's leading on-demand logistics transportation service provider. They have over 70,000 registered drivers across Asia, including Hong Kong, Singapore, Taiwan, Korea, India, and of course China. They are aggressively expanding across the region and they aim to dominate this fast and growing last mile logistics sector. The company is currently evaluated at over $1 billion and has raised a total of $276 million so far. Eugene is obviously the Chief Operations Officer and taking care of the company's directions and strategy, overall planning, execution and management, global expansion and development, as well as mergers and acquisitions. Eugene, welcome and thanks for taking the time to be with us today.
Pleasure is ours, or mine rather. Radu.
And I'd like to start with a question, a bit of a personal question about your story, because you've had a very interesting career. You've come from HP, then you moved into the advertising space and media space. You've had your own company, and now with GoGoVan. Tell us a little bit about your background.
Yeah, it's as you said, I've been in the startup entrepreneurial space for 20 years now. I started my career in Hewlett Packard, spent about 9 years there. In between that, a year in Nokia. So back in 1999, got the entrepreneurial bug, if you want to call it, the first wave of Internet 1.0. Left HP, started a company in the CRM CRM space. Did that. Of course, if you rewind history, 2001, the bubble burst. Of course, we were funded, but that said, we had to quickly make a profit, survive, which we did. Fast forward, we divested the company in 2007. And since then I've been in a few other startups. And of course, recently with GoGoVan as the CEO of the company.
How did you, I'm fascinated, how did you transition from, because you were in media advertising at the time, right? How did you find GoGoVan, or how did they find you?
Good question, Radu. Because I've been in the startup space for quite a while now, 20 years. It all started with investors and angel investors that I've known in the industry, in the countries that I've operated in, which are also investors in GoGoVan. So one meeting, led to the next, and they thought with my experience running the region, I could be of help to GoGoVan. And about 4.5 years ago, we had some discussions, and we thought it was a right fit to bring GoGoVan the next level of growth and expansion. So that's how it all started. And 4.5 years later, we're still here and growing. So it's been a pleasure myself working with the company and making it, the unicorn as we are today.
And obviously the startup bug is still ingrained in your veins, so that's always good. And tell us a little bit about GoGoVan. So it's grown tremendously in the last years. You have developed to include loads of drivers everywhere, and I think you also have now delivery trials in 4 mainland China cities for the Alibaba and Cainiao network, the logistics arm of e-commerce of Alibaba. Tell us a little bit about also and Alibaba, I think, invested in you guys, if I'm not mistaken. How's your collaboration also with Alibaba, and how has that maybe also helped you be where you are today?
A good question, Radu. Well, we today count Alibaba and Cainiao, which is the logistic arm of Alibaba, as our shareholders. They've been our shareholders for a while now. And late last year, because of some of the requirements of some of the major cities in China requires electronic vehicles, electronic trucks specifically, to be plying the cities in the near distant future. They put it in as a law now. So we are currently working with China and Alibaba to implement electronic trucks, vehicles into those cities, because at some point in time, in like several years, and each city is a little bit different in timing, there would be a legal requirement for us to deliver and operate in the city center itself. We will have to be applying with electronic vehicles.
And to the point with so this electric cars,
trucks, yeah.
And well, trucks, vans specifically for GoGoVan is a big trend and is coming in a big way all over the world, and obviously China, I think, is also playing a big part in pushing it. But also I wanted to kind of ask you in terms of, maybe let's go to the model, because I realized that I jumped into the question with Alibaba, but let's just go to the model. So explain it simply for some of the listeners that may not know what is GoGoVan, very simply put. What's the model of GoGoVan, simplistic?
Simply, we are a Uber for logistics. It's a platform business. We crowdsource our drivers. We have an app, a web, an API solution, depending on the sectors of customers we go after. So, in a nutshell, Radu, we are for the listeners, we are a Uber for logistics.
Mm-hmm. And there was a question, and this came from a shipper perspective, and then from somebody that works for a large manufacturing organization, and he was wondering, when you have so many drivers and when it's a platform like yours, how do you ensure process consistency? Because obviously you kind of have to rely that the driver will be where he says that he or she will say that they will be. How do you ensure that process consistency over the platform?
In the sharing space, it's not just in our space, in all sharing space that is currently in the market today. I think consistency it's the key critical success factor, whether it's office sharing space or apartment sharing space and so forth. So the consistency is always a challenge in the sharing space because you ultimately don't own the asset class that you manage. So for us, we take driver training very seriously. When drivers come and enroll on our platform, they do have to attend a class, and we take that class and training very seriously. Secondly, the feedback loop from our customers is also very important. We wouldn't say we have 100% of our drivers been 5 stars. There are drivers who don't do a good job. And through the feedback mechanism from our users, we weed them out, and until they improve and are consistent and performing accordingly to the requirements, we put them back on the platform. And last but not least, really, it's training is important. We bring them back, even though they are very good, to the center, to the offices, to make sure we communicate over and over again the requirements and the expectations when you do a service on our platform.
Regarding the ownership of the assets, and we spoke a little bit also about electric vans. Do you also own some of the vans, or it's all owned by the drivers?
Today we are pure crowdsource. We do, if you are in the countries we operate in and you see a GoGoVan van that's wrapped in our brand, we don't own them. That's part of a marketing arrangement we have with our drivers, but we don't own. We're a pure asset-like company today.
And when the push for the electric vans will come in the near future, do you think this will also work as it is, or will there be an adjustment a little bit in the model? Because I'm assuming, and I might be wrong, but I don't know if drivers will go electric that fast, or how fast they will basically embrace the trend.
Good question. I think electric vehicles today, if you look at the price tag, is still generally higher than a carbon combustion engine. So with that initiative, we are setting up a partnership of sort with the related parties, which I can't disclose right now, where we will work with them on providing a we'd call it asset right, like in the right amount of asset to provide the initial ticket price, which is quite high, for drivers to adopt electronic trucks as we roll this out in those various countries in China.
And I wanted also to bring the discussion to the fact that part of the reason why you've been extremely successful is also the merger that you've had with, I hope I'm pronouncing it correctly, 58 Suyun.
Yes.
Yep. So which was a fellow logistics on demand platform in China, and you merged. Tell us a little bit, how did that go? Because usually mergers and acquisitions are tricky. And what were some of the challenges, and how did you solve them? I think it's a story that a lot of listeners would love to hear.
Yes, mergers are always challenging, as history have shown and articulated in many examples. We merged with Upasu in 2017 August, so it's a little less, more than a year and a half ago. It was a decision we made cognitively because we were, of course, they were very China focused and relatively successful in China. We were, of course, in China ourselves and in other parts of the region. So instead of competing heads-on in China, which is a huge market, an expensive market, we thought would be a good decision on both sides to come together. So together we would take on the China market, and for the group now, then I think we have more resources to go after the rest of the region. It's been a good marriage so far. I wouldn't say it's 100% to be all candid, but it's been good. The challenges I think we face are primarily on the technical side. They have a big technical team, and so do we. The platform when we came together was a little bit different in terms of architecture, source codes and stuff. So trying to merge that was it still continued to be I wouldn't say without challenges. So that continues to be a big challenge for us moving forward. How do we maximize our technical resources and know-how? That said, if you look at, in fact, we run two brands. So we run Kuaigo Dache, which is a brand we have in China now, and we run GoGoVan outside China. So from that standpoint, we're very cognizant that the logistic last mile especially is a very global, local business. So we run two brands today as a company, though we're working actively on integrating the technology and maximizing some of the efficiency that we can bring together as a group.
I'd love to also ask you about culture, because when you merge two companies together, systems for sure are different to integrate, but much more difficult to integrate is the culture of the two organizations and putting the people together. How did that work out, and what were some of the steps that you took to maybe as a group ensure that there's consistency of culture and of teamwork?
We're not new to China as a company. Prior to the merger, Radu, we do operate in China, so we're familiar with the Chinese culture, the people, the dynamics. So it's not.
I mean the culture of the organizations, not the culture of China. So, for example, the culture of GoGoVan and the culture of
Uber.
Yeah.
So what I'm trying to say, Radu, is that we're not unfamiliar with the fact that we do operate in China prior to that. So we do understand the local culture, inklings, and so forth, right? So today we spend a lot of time, effort, and money on making sure that the communication is transparent, everybody's on the same page, and it's a continued effort on our side to make sure there's consistency. Culturally, we're aligned. When we say yes, it means yes. When we say no, it means no, and no reading in between the lines. And trust is important in any integration. I think until you get to a fundamental level of trust on both sides, it's a work in progress. But that said, I think we've been pleased with the merger so far, and we continue to grow as a group. And as I said to you earlier, the biggest challenge on a daily basis, as you pointedly write out, is of course technical, as you said earlier, and this whole cultural integration, which over the last 18 some months has been proving to be quite positive. We are again continue to spend effort and time on this particular matter, but so far I would say the marriage has been good.
Happy. Maybe let's take some example of shall I call them corporate clients. What do I mean by that? So we are now today in Singapore as we are recording the podcast. I recently went to IKEA, the furniture shop, and when you check out of IKEA, there's GoGoVan there as the main option to transport your stuff at home. So IKEA in Singapore currently, I think they don't even have their own delivery. It's all done through GoGoVan, if I'm not mistaken. So they are a happy partner for you guys. Tell us maybe one or two examples of corporate clients, if I may call them like this, that use your services and how you are helping them improve their, let's say, last mile operation.
Yeah, maybe a bit of backstep here in terms of our customer segments, Radu. We primarily have three customer segments. One being a consumer segment who places the order on an app, not different from taking an Uber or a Grab in the case of Singapore. The other segment is small medium enterprises, small companies who uses us to ship their stuff from chairs, flour, cakes, flowers, and so forth. And the third sector of our market segment is the enterprises. So logistics is primarily a B2B business. The first part, consumers using us, it's a growing part of our business, but not a big part of our business. We don't think that will ever be a big part of our business. SME and the corporates are in fact growing nicely for us. If you look at IKEA, it's primarily a B2B2C, call it. We help IKEA fulfill their customer promise that, you buy something from IKEA, you should be able to bring it home in the evening, assemble your bed, your chair, and enjoy the product, right? Other clients that we have on the enterprise side includes quite a few, actually. We do quite a bit across the region for other logistic companies. We count people like FedEx as our client. We even count many government, the Hong Kong government, for example, Hong Kong Post, for example, actually outsource their deliveries to us as well. On the enterprise side, I think many enterprises are realizing efficiency is important. If you look at people who in the enterprise side, if you own your own fleet of trucks or vans or lorries, they're not, utilized more than, depending on the companies, 60-70% of the time. That's pretty high already. Most of them are sub that. So I think when you start seeing opportunities like us, a crowdsource platform that could one day provide with you 5 trucks, or the next day provide with 50 trucks come Christmas or Black Friday or any of your promotion that you have, we as a crowd platform solution is able to help you in your peak time or your trough time, right? So the whole flexibility, I think that's where the enterprise sees is a lot of benefit to them. And the ability to do that effectively also to meet their customer needs.
Yes. I wanted to ask you, because certain let's take this is more of a thought that came now into my mind as you were sharing. Let's take a customer like, I don't know, Apple or Huawei, or large manufacturer. They would have very specific requirements for safety, compliance. Obviously, the products can be quite high in value as well. Not to say that doesn't apply to IKEA, but I'm just saying that it's a slightly different level of complexity. Are you also planning to, or are you already doing clients like that in your portfolio at the moment?
Yes, in fact, we talk about the names you mentioned. We actually ship extensively for Xiaomi, which is the other smartphone manufacturer in Taiwan. Actually, we ship them extensively, quite extensively. So I think a lot of, if you look at the supply chain, or if you look at delivery as a space, the whole on-demand requirements is driving a lot of this enterprises having to fulfill a product or delivery same day or within 2 hours. If you look at Mr. Amazon, it's a 2-hour delivery. And I think if Mr. Amazon is doing that at 2 hours, I think everybody to a certain extent has to follow. Otherwise, you lose your customers, right? So I think the whole idea, the trend of on-demand fulfillment, last mile is driving a lot of our growth. So not only from hardware manufacturers and names you mentioned, but all sectors. If you are buying a cake today, in the past you have to order your cake 3 days in advance. With the current consumer psychology, you're not going to order 3 days in advance. You're going to order same day, and in the morning you expect that cake to be delivered to you on the same day. I think the whole psychic of consumerism. It could be because of Amazon or other people in the same industry, and the whole psychology of the now consumerism. Everything's on demand, from coffee to food to entertainment. I think that whole psychology of consumerism is driving a lot of our demand and growth.
For good and for bad, because talk about cakes. I've recently had an experience with one of my friends who had a birthday party for his daughter, and well, let's just say that the cake was slightly damaged when it arrived. So then, and actually, this links to the question. We actually had a question which goes along the lines of what happens in this situation that there's lost or damaged goods, as goods. These goods would be covered by you guys as GoGoVan. Who would cover it? What would happen in that event? Because I'm sure that things can happen.
Yes, it's again. Let me take a step back and to answer that question, Radu. If you had used UPS to deliver it, if you had used any of this branded logistic companies to deliver it, do you ask the question who covers it if it's damaged?
Very good point.
Right. That said, if you go and read the fine prints of your shipment delivered by any of these traditional logistic companies, branded or otherwise, there is limited liability, right? So there is not like if you use one of those branded logistic companies, if you ship, a diamond, they will reimburse $10,000 if it gets lost or damaged. They all have limited liabilities. You just don't read the fine prints. Right? Just because we are a crowdsourced company, people question that, right? Oh, if you're crowdsourced, you're none of those branded guys. Who takes care of the liability if it's a damage?
What if the driver runs away?
Right, exactly, right? And by the way, it has happened even for the branded guys, yeah. So for us, yes, as a platform, the first line of liability falls on the driver, all right? Now, that said, being a platform which we are a fair platform, right? We also, if for whatever reason goods are damaged and it's no particular fault for either the driver or in the process of delivery, as a platform, we do cover, we do take care of certain liabilities. In Singapore's case, it's a maximum of $200, which we cover, right? So yes, the first line of defense would be the driver's liability. If there's no fault of anybody else, the platform being a good company like us, we would cover a liability of maximum of $200. Mm-hmm. And that's about, by the way, about the same as any of these branded logistic companies. I'm not going to name who, but if you ever go to their webpage and scroll down liability, you'll find that we are probably more than they cover. We are covering, our liability coverage is probably more than theirs. But anyways, But I think people ask that question because when you crowdsource, like we do, all right, the whole liability becomes more of a concern than otherwise.
Yes. And I mean, it also, people have gotten burnt. So I think that burnt in the sense that all kind of things happen. But also, I mean, it's a little bit, if I may use this analogy, which may or may not be, let's say, so close. But initially, when the cloud was coming up and everybody was like talking about putting everything in the cloud, a lot of IT departments were like, is it safe? And still, I think even today, the safety question is still there, right? But if any of the big companies, IBM, Oracle, or whatever, something happens with their security, their share market and stock price will go tumbling down. It's much more likely that they're going to have all the security in place than, let's say the XYZ company, small SME, right? So in some ways, in my mind, it's a little bit similar, but I think it's also normal that in the human psychic, we have that kind of concern or fear or...
Rightly so, yes.
Rightly so. I wanted also to bring the discussion to this question that I found very good from one of our listeners who asked, are there any cost-effective strategies that you are using in order to mitigate your cost of transportation? Because obviously if you deliver one item per trip or versus if you deliver three, or I don't know, maybe you do batching, maybe you do other things. Are there certain strategies that you use in order to keep your costs lower and maybe increase your profitability?
Yes, logistics is primarily a price game. When I say price game, you have to deliver logistics last mile or other miles in a cost-effective way. For us today, we focus on intra-city, within the city, point to point, right? Distance based. There are plans in place to consolidate on the move, real time. And when I say that, Radu, what does it mean? So basically, and again, this is development in the making, and we should have this sometime the next year or so. If you are going from point A to point B, a driver is sending a parcel from point A to point B, and along the way in the same direction, there's a pickup for another parcel in the same direction, in the same time frame. The algorithm we are designing would enable that driver to stop at that midpoint, collect the parcel at a lower rate, because now it's going consolidating on the fly, right? Real time. I think that's where I think would be a big change in terms of price competitiveness and affordability of logistics and efficiency of logistics. Is that possible? Answer is yes. It requires some development on our end as a platform, algorithm on our end on a platform. But is it possible? Answer is yes.
Because that definitely will be a game changer for sure, and it also comes with volumes. I mean, the more volumes you get, the more clients you get, the more heat maps you get, the more likely that you can do this kind of batching or kind of on the way consolidation. And I want to ask this kind of so many people ask this question, especially with startups like yourselves, right? Which are, that's the phrase, right? Burning money, or some people call it burning money, some people call it developing fast, right? Depends on on which side of the story you sit. And then you have the conservative or established models where it's very much focused, no, how much money are you currently making and make sure you make a profit, right? So there's a little bit of a different type of mindset. How are you planning, or do you have, and how important is it for you guys to turn to profitability quickly, or how do you think? It's more like, maybe the question is, and I'm formulating the question as I go a little bit, but how do you think about these things, right? In terms of profitability versus achieving scale versus achieving, obviously, the international expansion that you want.
Yeah, I think you mentioned about this burning and buying market share. I think that's very true, especially I think in the ride sharing space. The likes of Uber and Lyft, which are listed and their financials are public. I think we should make a distinction between ride sharing and logistic crowd sharing like us. In the ride sharing space, you are in many extent, to a large extent, even I'm a beneficiary of it. They throw discounts at you, they throw rebates to the driver to really get you to change your behavior, right? And that's the whole customer acquisition and stuff. I think with logistics, it doesn't mean that if I give you a discount for 20%, Radu, that you will move your chair that you're sitting on today. Because if there's no need to move the chair, you won't move the chair even though it's free. So in our space, it's a mission critical business. Our marketing cost of acquisition it's a dime to what the other guys, the ride sharing guys, are spending. So in a mission critical business in logistics, we don't spend as much. In fact, very little compared to the ride sharing guys out there, in terms of customer acquisition and change management. Right, it's much more an awareness of the customers that we have today that you could use on demand. So it's a big distinction. We don't. I would say as a group we have a positive GP. So we do make revenue on the rides because we don't throw discounts like the other guys do. So from that standpoint, it's I believe the model is a little bit more solid because it's a mission critical business. You're just driving efficiency to that, right? As a group, we are not profitable because we are still in expansion phase, going to new cities and new countries. Every time you go into a new location, as you create the ecosystem, the demand and supply side, you are required to spend money, right? Awareness, preference, recruitment of drivers, and so forth. But once it's up and running, our gross profit, I think, is quite decent. Right, because we're not giving back to the consumers, to the asset class, more than we're charging.
Yes.
Yeah.
So basically your costs are much more towards setting it up, attracting the drivers initially to the platform, and then obviously also making the audience or your end clients aware that there's this app that you can now use instead of going and booking your own trucks or whatever they might be using. So thanks for clarifying that. I wanted also to ask you, you are in expansion mode. You probably would qualify for what is called the hyperscaling startup. You've grown tremendously. What are some of the biggest challenges, and you're the COO, right? So what are some of the biggest challenges from an operation perspective that you have today in terms of continuing this fast-paced growth?
Yeah, I think we continue to grow. We've just expanded into Vietnam, Ho Chi Minh this year. So our challenges are really a few things. One, unlike the ride-sharing space, which I think from a process standpoint, from taking a taxi, for example, is quite universal. The process of taking a taxi is very universal. Versus I think in the logistics space, especially in the last mile, understanding the markets is very important for us. The nuances, the processes, the expectation is very important for us. So before we go into a particular market, we spend probably 3 to 6 months to understand the last mile market, which is very different for each country. Different asset class, 3-wheelers in some countries, 20-year-old trucks in some countries, and you don't find that in Singapore. And understanding the customer expectation, right? So I think making sure we understand the market is important, and having the appropriate resources and processes in place that's consistent is important. So once we understand the market, put in place the resources and the processes to make sure those are consistent with the market needs. And last but not least, really hiring the right people, and to make sure that we continue to deliver on an ongoing basis customer satisfaction. And just talking to your colleague in the hallway, who seemed to have a good experience at GoGoVan in Singapore, to have that kind of avocation by our consumers and our customers on an ongoing basis.
And let's talk a little bit about different markets, because that's you nailed it on the head in many ways. And I think many companies coming to Asia face the same reality check. In terms of different markets have different needs and different ways of going about it. So maybe tell us a little bit in terms of the different markets that you operate, what are some of the differences, and maybe what are some of the commonalities?
Well, the commonalities first, which is the easier one. You'll find that drivers generally want to do a good job. The drivers that are in the logistics space are decent people. Most of them do this for a full time. I wouldn't say that's true for the ride-sharing space. Most of the drivers in the ride-sharing space are in between jobs, part-time doing it. And the logistics, the commonality across the regions are drivers in generally want to do a good job because it's their job. That's their rice bowl, right? And the differences, I think it's as I said to you earlier, Radu, it's just customer expectation. Is it door to door? Is labor included?
Do you come up the stairs?
Do you come up the staircase, right? Can you load a 1-ton truck with a 3-ton load, right? Is it legal or not? So those are the challenges, I think, for us. And developing a technology, a platform, and an app that really tailors to that. We tweak our app. If you are in Hong Kong or in Singapore, you realize our app is a bit different. Just because we have to customize or tweak our platform with the right feature to meet the local expectation, right? So those are the challenges. But generally, I think once we get that set up nicely, really operating with real processes, consistency is the other one. And as you mentioned earlier, the other question was how do you provide, how do you ensure that drivers consistently do the work or deliver the right customer satisfaction. That's always a challenge in a crowdsourcing platform. We don't own them, and again, educating, communicating, feedback loop is important for us. For as we, the whole education and making sure that we have a dialogue with our asset class. That's the other thing. We spend a lot of money and time on.
Mm. And how do you kind of decide, or how have you decided in the past and in the future as well? And you don't need to name, obviously, the markets that you would expand further. That's obviously going to be confidential. But how do you make a decision? Okay, let's go into this market versus this market. Vietnam. You just mentioned. So you just launched Vietnam.
We just launched Vietnam.
We actually had a question from somebody in Vietnam. When are you coming to Vietnam? So he hasn't yet seen you in the streets, but I'm sure in very quick course. So yeah, how do you make these decisions based on what would be your key criteria?
So yeah, I think logistic is a factor of size of the country and the people of the number of people in the country. So the big markets are your China, your India, where we are in. Of course, I think economies like Indonesia is interesting for us and so forth, right? And even Japan is an interesting one. But I think versus trying to be everywhere at one time, we stay focused on making sure in the countries we decide to go in that we do a good job, stabilize it. We certainly some path to profitability in sight. So we're not expanding like a mushroom everywhere. We tend to be, from that standpoint, at this moment, rather conservative. We are still in 7 countries, 300 over cities across the region. Again, for us, it's really making sure that in the countries we operate today, it's stable, it's growing, and there's a light in the tunnel in terms of profitability for the countries we're in before we mushroom everywhere. We get requests from all countries all over the world to want to bring us to that country, from Europe to Americas. But again, we have sort of said no or at least wait. So as a company, we are quite conservative in that standpoint. We really watched on and make sure that whatever countries that we're in, the customers are happy, we grow, there's growth in the country before we go on to the next one. Because I think like any, I think a lot of startups have the challenges of trying to chew on, to bite on too much they can chew on. To have a big, to really grow too fast. And I think that has been the pitfall for many aggressive startups, really trying to be everywhere to everybody. We tend to be a little bit more conservative from that standpoint. And I think it's proven to be good for us. Most of the customers and countries we are in, we do a good job, and from different end users, SMEs, and enterprises, they seem to like us, which I think is important. And then just saying, 70 countries, tomorrow, which I think is sometimes nice to say, but I'm not sure it's the right thing to do.
Mm-hmm. And somebody was actually asking also about products. It's a different type of a product, which is the cross-border one. And I will ask you the question, though I pretty much guessed the answer just based on what you just shared. But the question was, are you looking also into a cross-border product or into a longer duration between cities? Because right now you're doing in the city itself type of a business as well, or not really?
We continue to expound and deliberate, how do we go up the value chain, how you go and do this across different asset class. I think the thought right now, Radu, is to stay focused on intracity in the asset class we do. To do cross-border, first of all, it's a different asset class. We're talking about 16-wheelers, 18-wheelers. We're talking about business that's very different in processes. Even the customers are different. So we could do it, but I'm not sure we want to do it because I think I say going back to the whole expansion thing. The last thing you want is to be, everything to everybody and no go to anybody. So to answer your question, we will near term at least stay focused in intra-city in the asset class we manage.
And also, I would want to bring now the discussion towards the human capital side of the business. And you mentioned that that's a challenge. And pretty much everybody that I've had on the podcast from this perspective of a hyperscaling startup has said the same thing. And actually, I would argue that everybody on this podcast has answered what's your biggest challenge in some way, shape, or form with people as one of the answers. Not the only one, but one of the biggest one. So how do you address that? And particularly when you expanded to Vietnam, right? I mean, the key part is also finding that right city launcher, right? Or city launch squad to do it. So how do you look and think about attracting and getting the right person to move into the new city?
Yeah, in any company, startup or otherwise, I think the human capital is quite essential to any business growth and expansion. And especially for a startup, because you are competing with people with either deeper pockets, bigger names. You mentioned about launcher. If you're technical people, you're competing with the likes of the listed companies that are expanding in this region. So for us, it's really looking for people with passion, people with commitment, people with willingness to learn. More the EQ than the IQ. When I say that, because I think. Logistics is a business. I was never in the logistic business till I came to GoGoVan. So you can pick up those hard skills. I don't think it's a problem, right? Processes are not that Einstein. You're not flying a rocket to the moon. But I think people with the right attitude. So we take our time to hire. We take our time to look for the right people. So one of those, I think there's a mantra to hiring people is sort of slow to hire and quick to fire. I would rather take my time to hire the right launcher, the right country manager, city manager, and if we don't find one, it's okay. We'll take our time. The last thing you want is, especially for a young company like us, is to hire and then fire. It just disrupts everything from people, training, culture, communication, learning. Just going back 101. So for us, it's really looking for the right people. We will take our time doing that, and we do deliberate. We do have multiple rounds of interviews before we decide on hiring someone in the countries.
Moreover, there's the part with the fight. So the city launcher is one thing, but there's a big fight on the tech side. Which you're already in the space of, you basically have to fight with your Googles and Facebooks and otherwise all the people sitting in Shenzhen, I guess. There's the Silicon Valley of China more and more. How do you and your data scientists and, we spoke about potentially batching things and that's basically in the realm of, how do you do algorithms and smart processes. How do you attract those people to GoGoVan? Because also the big challenge is that logistics and supply chain has not been seen as currently also in the process of trying to get sexier in terms of appeal to job seekers.
So we can't compete with the names that you talked about in terms of compensation. We can't outpay them. This is impossible, right? What we provide as a company is an environment where you make a difference. That's one. Your voice is heard. Right, and also very importantly, maybe thirdly, would be an opportunity to do cross-functional work. Right, you don't just if you're a launcher. If you're doing a good job, you could be a marketer in a couple of years. If you do a good job, we don't mind taking you into product management. So I think we try very hard to create an environment in the company that allows people to grow, that allows people to be heard, that allows people to learn. So I think many of us are doing it. I mean, even the likes of Google are doing it, but I think we try and do it in as much a fun way as possible. We have no hierarchy. When I say that hierarchy, you can, anybody in a company can come talk to me or our CEO. We still don't have rooms. So I think we to create an environment is important. And if anything else, maybe another area we spend a lot of time is listening. We spend a lot of time making sure that our employees are heard, irrespective of rank and file. That we hear what they say, and we try our best to improve on areas that they have concern with. Yeah, is it a battle? Answer is yes, because I think as a young startup, you especially talent, good talent, technical or otherwise, it's hard to find. I think from a retention standpoint, in most of the countries do a decent job. We do monitor that as well to make sure that our retention rate as a staff turnover is relatively low, and we actively make sure we manage that.
Are there certain things about you being a C-level executive in GoGoVan? Obviously, you are part of the shaper of the culture of the organization. What would you say what would be some of the key values that you drive through in and out with your colleagues, from the CEO to the CFO to the leadership team of GoGoVan, to make sure that this is consistent culture of GoGoVan is about these things? What are those things?
There's
Big
no
question,
magical
but yeah.
no magical one on that. I think if one thing we try to do and do very hard is walk the talk. If you say something and you say to be transparent, if you're saying you need to be customer focused, you need to do it and walk the talk, and not just put it on a plug or on a PowerPoint slide. When you want to create an environment of friendliness and openness, you need to talk as well. You can't be shutting yourself in a meeting room 20 hours a day and don't talk to anybody. So it all starts from walking the talk. And that's important, because I think managing millennials these days, it's about walking the talk. You don't. I think gone are the days where you say my values are this, and this is sitting on a plug on a wall. I think the new paradigm of management is really engage employees. If you say something, mean it, and been candid and honest. I think that's important. People see through things if you don't, if you're not candid and honest to yourself and to your staff.
Absolutely. I mean, if there's anything that I've also observed from where we sit as consultants, as headhunters, as whatever. I mean, even if it's just let's take LinkedIn, right, as the biggest social media platform. I think for B2B, I think it's quite obvious that people are shifting, and the mindset is shifting more towards, okay, how can I know this person better? Whether I'm working for him or her, whether I'm in the same company or whether I'm external to the company applying, I want to see what's the authentic part of this people, of their culture, of what they stand for, of their values, and it's becoming more and more important. And you have then Glassdoor, where you can have access to information about the truth in terms of the company. So it's really not no more that type of fake it till you make it, of put up a persona.
Well said.
Put up a persona, and then people won't figure it out, because they will, or eventually, maybe it takes a little bit of time. You can fake it for a while, but ultimately the truth will prevail.
Right.
So I think that's a wonderful point that you made. I wanted to kind of bringing the discussion towards an end. I wanted to ask you, from your long experience, what would be some advice or some sharing that you can impart in terms of principles that have helped you the most, looking back in terms of your past?
I've been in, as I said earlier at the beginning of the discussion, Radu, I've been an entrepreneur for 20 years. If anything else, as an entrepreneur now, I probably belong to the more senior crowd. Maybe two things. One, continue to be open and learn about everything. Right. I think that's one thing. Having an open mind is important. And secondly, I think be able to see things in different lenses, different lights. Sometimes adversities viewed differently can be an opportunity, right? So I think those things are interesting as a philosophy of managing a company and growing a company. So yeah, no magical one again, and that's again my personal philosophy would be really learn as you grow as you learn, be open to differences, be open to different mindsets and different solutions that are constantly coming in on the horizon in all aspects of work and life.
Thank you, Eugene. It's been great having you. Thanks for all the sharing and the case studies, and we want to wish you and GoGoVan a continued successful story. And for sure, we will be trying to use you guys, and I'll pass the feedback if no matter positive or otherwise, I'll tell you, and you'll be the first to call.
Thank you very much, Radu, for having me. Thank you very much.
Thank you for listening to our podcast. If you liked what you heard, be sure to go to www.elcotglobal.com and click the podcast button for all the show notes of the interview. Also, subscribe to our mailing list to get our latest updates first. If you're listening through a streaming platform like iTunes, Spotify, or Stitcher, we would appreciate a kind review. 5-star works best to keep us going and our production team happy. And of course, share it with your friends. I'm most active on LinkedIn, so do feel free to follow me. And if you have any suggestions on what to do and who to invite next, don't hesitate to drop me a note. And if you're looking to hire top executives in supply chain or transform your business, of course, contact us as well to find out how we can help.